Feel the power.
Oh, I can feel it.
Our moment of triumph approaches. It's
GrokTALK.
3, 2, 1.
We'd like to welcome you to another edition of GrokTALK, brought to you by New Hampshire's leading conservative blog site, GraniteGrok.com. We are your feared, extremist, right-wing, hard-charging, gun-toting, opinionated, outspoken, rabble-rousing, letter-writing, radio microphone stomping conservatives and rational libertarians. So get ready for more news and opinion you could only get from GraniteGrok.com.
GrokTALK.
Welcome back to GrokTALK. I'm Steve McDonald here with Skip Murphy, Mike Rogers, and Tom Flaherty's joined us today. All contributors at GraniteGrok.com. Go there and read what we write every day. There's plenty to see. Local, national, cultural, and some screwy stuff that has nothing to do with any of those things. But, hey, that's what it's all about. Delivering a lot of content in a variety of different ways.
And we all do this as part-timers.
Yeah, for free. You don't have to pay.
Well, I get paid by the Koch brothers, don't you?
No, I'm sorry.
Well, we got awards, but that was it. A plaque each. That's about it.
I got 2 checks last week.
I got a Blogger of the Month thing from AFP. That's about the best I'm going to get. Anyway.
And annual Activist of the Year, but never a check.
No money.
And no matter what the Democrats here in New Hampshire keep saying that we're part of the Koch brothers, it's like, who else pays for this stuff but for me? They don't support us.
I'm not giving you any money.
Yeah,
Anyway,
remember when I threw that 10th Amendment shindig and the union protest was outside? I thought I was part of the Koch brothers.
Yeah. I got them on speed dial. Okay. Welcome back to GrokTALK. We'd like to thank Pete and Jemmy, the tech guy, for coming by on our last segment to give us his post-election requiem, but we're going to move forward. On the phone, we have Jonathan Last, who's a writer for the Weekly Standard. He's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Post, and many, many more. He is currently, most recent project is as the editor of the 7 Deadly Virtues, 18 conservative writers on why the virtuous life is funny as hell. Jonathan, welcome to the program.
I'm so glad that you guys are not getting Coke money, too. Why do all this stuff about the Coke-topus, as the people on the left call it?
Yes.
I'm not getting anything. How do I get on that gravy train? It's like you people only want the Keystone XL pipeline because you're getting money from big oil. I'm like, I can get money from big oil? How do I do that? Where do I sign up?
So you've put together this book, which I just started reading a couple days ago. I kind of hopped around. There's a couple of writers in it that I really enjoyed. P.J. O'Rourke, Michael Graham, Matt Labash, Christine Rose, and Jonathan Goldberg. You got 18 of them. It's a great lineup. One of the things that I read is... in regard to the book, is Americans still have virtues, but the problem is we're organizing around the wrong ones. You want to explain that for us, please?
Yeah, well, if you think about it, I think people are sort of superficially, they say, oh, well, we live in a world that doesn't care about virtue anymore. And so the perfect example of this is, do you guys remember back in 1993 when somebody on MTV asked Bill Clinton, boxers or briefs?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And it was like this giant scandal, and women were clutching their pearls and swooning, and oh my goodness, can you believe that people would talk that way? And, now we have Anthony Weiner texting out pictures of his junk. And everybody sort of shrugs. It's like, hey, sure, run for mayor. It's no big deal. So I think the superficial reaction of this is to say, oh, we don't care about virtue anymore. But I don't think that that's what's going on. I think what we've done is we've just reorganized ourselves around different virtues. And so, for that, the perfect example would be Donald Sterling. So you guys probably already forgotten, everyone's already forgotten the guy who was the most evil man in America for 2 weeks back in August. But he's the guy who was on the Clippers, and he was recorded by his mistress saying some, nasty racist things, and then those recordings got leaked out. And so he became the worst person in the world, and the president of the United States interrupted a foreign trip to hold a press conference to condemn him. His fellow NBA owners voted to make him sell his franchise from his property. It was real Hester Prynne stuff. But unremarked in all of this was that he'd been cheating on his wife of 60 years and really humiliating her and treating her badly. But that wasn't part of the brief against her. So adultery is no longer a big deal, but racism, hold the phone, that's a really big thing. And so that's what I think is going on. We've got different virtues that we organize ourselves around, but we're real puritanical about those.
Yeah, Jonathan, I just think it also quite apropos that having been the most evil person in the world, didn't he get a profit of $1 billion or $2 billion after the sale of his basketball team?
Yeah, I think so. Before that, it was valued at people thought it would sell for $600 million, and it sold for I think 1.6. So he took an extra $1 billion on top of what I think he paid $32 million. Am I right about that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's a pretty good ROI, right?
Yeah.
Pays to be evil, I guess.
So you've identified some modern virtues. You just kind of inferred to them. What are they?
So I was going through and trying to figure out, so what are these modern virtues? And I think that you could make a case that the cardinal modern virtues are freedom, convenience, progress, equality, authenticity, health, and, of course, non-judgmentalism. Because nobody wants to be judgmental about anything.
I
think if you sort of look around...
Jonathan, I could say
you've never... You can see that.
You've never really done war against the left as far as running into non-judgmentalism, then.
Right. Well, it's not judgmentalism for thee, but not for me, right?
Yes.
That's how they view it. I mean, these things wind up in conflict with one another all the time. And so, you can't smoke. God forbid you want to smoke a cigarette in America now. You're like a leper, except that we pity lepers. If you smoke, you're just a terrible person. But and that's because of health, right? So the reason we think smoking is so terrible is because it's not healthy, and we think that anything that's not healthy is really, really bad. Unless you want to smoke weed, in which case that's awesome, because that's freedom, right? And so these modern virtues wind up in tension with one another pretty easily, I think, because they are, they're not bad things, but I would say they're second-order goods, and they're a little bit superficial.
In the Seven Deadly Virtues, you contend that no single virtue is by itself sufficient, and each virtue taken on its own is corruptible. Why is this the case, and what is the most important virtue?
Okay, so the reason is, and this is something that has sort of emerged from the book, and I hadn't really thought of it beforehand, but most of our writers sort of hit on this, is that all these virtues, they sound like they're good ideas. Perseverance sounds like a good thing. Hope sounds like a good thing. Chastity, maybe not so much. But so they sound okay, but if you take them to extremes without having them be leavened or buttressed or in some ways even confined a little bit by the other virtues, they can wind up being bad things. So, take curiosity, right? Curiosity is an incredibly important virtue. Without curiosity, we would still be living in caves and clubbing animals with sticks and roasting them over an open fire. But on the other hand, if all you have is curiosity, you're just a gossip, right? You turn into somebody who's, really sort of unpleasant. Or worse, right? Like Joseph Mengele was incredibly curious, whatever else you want to say about him.
Well, the NSA is curious, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. So, you need curiosity.
It was started by Bush. We call it Curious George.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's what we're saying is that, look, these things are all nice. Don't get carried away with any one of them. And, it's like in everything, it turns out that what your grandmother told you is basically right. Moderation in all things.
What steps...
Except for chastity.
I was reading... I didn't get a chance to read them all, but I think people need to pick up the book and take a look, because you're talking about 18, conservative and right-leaning writers who are talking about the cardinal virtues and then even the modern virtues, and putting them in a unique perspective. I got a chance to read PJ's. I started reading Michael Graham's. I kind of looked through Jonah Goldberg's because I really like these guys. They inspire me, and the way I write myself is kind of driven from that kind of snarkiness. Did you have any favorites, or is that not something you can say as an editor?
I love all my children equally. What do you mean, favorites? So PJ's your boy, right?
He lives up here.
Up there in the wild. Yeah, the wilds of New Hampshire. PJ's is fantastic. Christopher Buckley, whom I fell in love with Christopher Buckley when I was 14 and started reading his novels. So I'd idolized him since I was a kid. And his is really good. Do you guys know James Lilacs? He writes for National Review, and he's a columnist for Minneapolis Star Tribune. His essay is about simplicity, which is not like a showstopper topic, but it is unflippin' believable. So great. I can't even tell you. So I'm a writer, so I read a lot. People don't realize that when your job is writing for a living, it really means that you spend 90% of your time reading and then 10% of your time writing. So I read a lot of stuff. And his essay in this book on simplicity is probably my favorite essay that I've read in the last 10 years anywhere. It's just awesome. And what's funny about this, if you know anything about Lilac, so he's a hoarder. The guy keeps everything. He collects pictures of Dust Bowl families, cufflinks from different World's Fairs, matchbooks from diners. I mean, the guy he has a problem. So him writing about simplicity is in itself really funny, but it's just an unbelievably awesome essay. I really can't recommend it highly enough.
Any particular reason why you decided to use humor to discuss these topics?
I mean, you're supposed to have like a really deep excuse for why you wrote these books. You know, like what I'm supposed to tell you is why I've been living in Greece, and I was in a cave for 2 years, and I was meditating on Aristotle. But the truth is, the lady who runs Templeton Press, her name is Susan Argano. She's just awesome. She's so great that I became friends with her when she rejected my first book. And so, like, you know, she's so awesome that as she was telling me, no, I don't like this, I'm not going to publish it, I was like, oh, you're so great, we should be friends. And she and I were just talking on the phone, like, you know, just hanging out. And, like, literally, she said, boy, I've always wanted to do a book that was funny. And I said, you know, and I was like, well, what if you did a bunch of people? We got to, like, you know, Jonah and TJ and Buckley and Andy Ferguson. And she's like, oh, this is great. And she said, what should be bad? I said, well, you could do with Virtue, because Virtue is funny. You get to talk about vice. And then, anyway, so, like, I wake up the next morning in the backseat of a Volkswagen with a llama and a book contract. And that's literally how the thing came about. It was just, we were talking on the phone, and we thought it sounded like fun. And the whole idea, like, the goal of the book is to have fun. I think, you know, I would say this because it's my book, but I think it's a really good time. I think it's a lot of fun, and it's the type of thing that is not a chore. You know, you will look forward to spending time with it and paging through it, and, you know, you can skip around and read the pieces out of order, or, you know, go right to PJ, or, you know, skip Rob Long if you just hate Rob Long, you just don't like Cheers. It's yeah, so that's the whole thing. The mission statement for this book is really just have a good time.
Something sometimes we here at GrokTALK need to do. We are hardcore right-wing political bloggers, although we do describe ourselves as ADD bloggers, squirrels. And sometimes, you know, maybe something like that we do need to do some more reading. Maybe I need to take a look at this book, because right now, the way things are going, as we were kind of yelling at each other the first two segments, it's like, oh my gosh, we're ready to go off the cliff.
We're like 11 days after the best election ever. What are you going off the cliff about?
Well,
just because you guys lost the one race.
No. Oh no. We're very happy that here in New Hampshire the top two ticket holders lost. To be perfectly blunt about it, that would be Walt Havenstein and Scott Brown, because we don't think that they're all that conservative, nor necessarily all that conservative. And when you insult your base, you deserve to lose. But I'm thinking of what's going on here with Obama deciding that Congress is just a multi-letter word, and that's about it, and what he's about to do. And you're right. Sometimes we do have to sit back and just laugh at something, because otherwise we're so depressed.
It's an
Hey,
inside.
look, it's only going to be 5 million illegal immigrants that are amnesty. It's not going to be 13 million. Look on the bright side. Man, you guys are such down.
Yeah, it's tough when you're inside the sausage factory every day, and the stuff kind of gets you down. You know, you're like, I don't let it get me down. I just know it is what it is. But Skip's remarks lead to my next question, which is about the separation of maybe public and government morality and policy. I know there's been a lot of people who pay attention to this feel like what Skip feels. You know, they don't think the government has any connection to morality whatsoever. Is that even? I don't see how that's even desirable.
Well, you know, it is and it isn't. Did you guys pay any attention to Rick Santorum back in 2012?
Sure.
He made. So part of his stump speech was this really, really interesting point that he made, which is that you cannot have a small government if you don't have a virtuous society. And so what he used an example of, you know, sort of ethical standards for Congress. And he says, you know, like for 100 years it never occurred that congressmen might act badly in certain ways. Because we just, you know, it was assumed that we had sort of an ethical code that everybody would de facto abide by. And then once, you know, in the early 90s, once they started doing this one particular thing, it was real estate investment deals on the side. Once it turned out that they were not just going to abide by this, then you had to legislate it, right? Because you can't have congressmen doing this sort of thing. So you have to, like, erect a whole big thing of laws then. You're adding laws to the book. You then have to stand up an enforcement agency to do it. You then have to stand up, more courts to adjudicate all these things. And so as you lose sight of virtue as a society, the government will necessarily grow. And as government grows, government then becomes less less well suited to actually sort of enforcing virtue in a way, right? And so these things are tied together in this vicious cycle. And I'm not sure that there's any hope for all this in this. Now I'm going to be depressing, but I think it's largely true. So virtuous societies will necessarily be big government, smaller government societies. Virtuous societies will be larger government societies, and that creates all sorts of problems.
Jonathan, we're going to take a quick break. Stay on the line. We'll be right back. We're talking to Jonathan Last, the editor of the 7 Deadly Virtues. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested, riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW, New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
All right, we are back from our very short break. Try to keep them short. We want to spend more time talking to our guests, which is why we've trimmed up our bumpers on the ends. And on the phone we have Jonathan Last, the editor of the 7 Deadly Virtues, 18 conservative writers on why the virtuous life is funny as hell. Skip.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what you were talking about just before the break, Jonathan. It used to be that we all had internal governance. As you said, the first 100 years there was no need for ethics in Congress because everybody was virtuous, at least, we can say that. But most people understood that they had to be self-governing. And now, since the 60s, a result of the boomer generation, of which I am a part of, do anything that you want as long as you don't think it's going to hurt anybody. And basically, it's take that little guy sitting on your shoulder and hurl him away as far as you can. And instead of the internal governance, I think I have to agree with you that progressivism says you don't need to have that internal governance. Have a libertine attitude towards life, do what you want regardless, but then it goes ahead and takes a hold of government and starts putting steel bars into the ground to surround you because, after all, if you just go off libertine in a libertine lifestyle, we have to put boundaries around you. Famously, Al Gore about taking lots of money from Tibetan monks that had no money. It's like, well, there was no governing authority. In other words, there was no law against it. And how does that play into this book?
Well, I think it doesn't really play into this book. The book is incredibly sort of fun, I think, and we designed it to be sort of politically ecumenical. So my goal was that if you have a daughter who is, in her junior year of college, she's majoring in sociology, God help us, she has a nose ring and she wears Che Guevara t-shirts, she won't be offended by anything, and in fact, she'll laugh a lot and enjoy it. And by the same token, you guys, I think, will enjoy it. And, if you got a brother or an uncle who, I don't know, listens to Hugh Hewitt or Rush or Mike Medved, they're going to enjoy it too. But that doesn't mean that you're wrong about what you're saying, though. I think you're very right. But the sort of when it comes to the bigger sort of macro implications of that, we sort of left that well enough alone. The idea being that it becomes obvious if you start to think about it afterwards.
Are there any particular specific arguments or anecdotes from the book that you find interesting, things that you think would maybe entice people to go out and get it?
There's so much. So we got this great chapter on temperance by this kid Andrew Stiles, who gets the Washington Post. He's a young writer. He's incredibly funny for how young he is. And he's talking about temperance. We've now come to a world where so back during Prohibition, we had government going out and trying to take everybody's hooch from them. And today, just a year ago in Washington D.C., we had a big to-do because bars were being accused of not giving enough booze in the drinks. And so the D.C. Council had their Bureau of Weights and Measures staging raids on bars to measure their pouring, make sure they were pouring enough enough vodka into people's mojitos and stuff. So it's really funny. The Chastity chapter is great. That's my buddy Matt Labash. I don't know if you guys know him. He's the Weekly Standard. He works with me. And he opens his chapter on chastity with a scene from the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia, which is in 2004. maybe 2000, I'm forgetting which. Anyway, so he goes to this event that's being held just off-site, so just, like down the block from the official convention, that's being held in an adult bookstore. It's a lecture being given by porn star Nina Hartley. And so she is lecturing on George W. Bush's prospective Supreme Court appointment, but she's totally nude. And it just sort of then goes off the rails from there. It's Labash's Chastity essay is worth the price of admission all on its own.
We read a lot about the culture. It's just amazing, absolutely amazing. So, what else? I'm running out of questions. You see any signs in our culture that make you optimistic about our nation's future?
No.
Well, join the club.
Yeah. No, look, I'm conservative. Of course I'm pessimistic. We're always pessimistic about everything. Yeah. No, I'm not optimistic. I think we're basically screwed. We might as well laugh, though, as the rocket ship is crashing and have a good time. But it's more or less where we are, I think. And I don't know.
That's almost like the hitchhiker. Yeah. That's almost like the hitchhiker guide.
Yeah.
Contributors
are probably split on this. Some of them are sort of. There's a strain of conservatism which always believes, hey, people advance, and society changes, and we actually find ways to muddle through. And I enjoy that sort of happy talk, I guess. It's one way of looking at it, but that's where I guess the libertarian view, which was believed that we're always having progress, technological progress is good, and it allows us to surmount other obstacles. There's like a Santayana line about this. Americans don't solve their problems; they just move past them. And that's comforting in its own way. I just don't know that I believe it myself.
What do you think is the greatest threat to virtue in modern America, and how do we combat it?
The greatest threat to virtue in modern America? I don't know, Kim Kardashian's ass. I don't know. I have to admit that the whole Kim Kardashian thing I find vaguely mystifying and also kind of upsetting as well. She's talentless. There have always been people who are famous for being famous in America. That's not a new thing. But normally they have some core talent of however minimal. It's like Charo. Are you guys old enough to remember Charo?
I do.
Yeah, sure.
Coochie Coo from Hollywood Squares. She could actually play classical guitar. Not very well, but that's where her thing came from. And I think so with the advent of Paris Hilton and Kim Kardashian, we wound up with people who had mega amounts of fame. And it was, I think the difference then was that they became famous for being famous at the moment that reality television was happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so what reality television does is it makes people famous for being famous, and they were already famous for being famous. And so all of a sudden it was like you're going to this wormhole, and you wind up with Kim Kardashian on the cover of Paper Magazine. And I just think really, let's go back to, let's say Kate Upton makes it. Kate Upton wants to get naked on the cover of Paper Magazine. That I can get behind, but at least she's Kate Upton.
Yeah, it kind of brings up the whole idea of make a sex tape and now you become a billionaire because, both of those folks have made millions, if not billions of dollars over what they then took to be a commercial empire. But has deviancy become one of the new virtues?
Has what become one of the new virtues?
Deviancy, sort of like what that...
deviancy. I thought you were, doing some sexual acronym that I had, was so far out I didn't even know what it was. I was like, deviancy? Jesus, what is that?
I mean, has deviancy become the new normal at this point?
You know what? It's like a career option now. I mean, the idea that you can sit down with your agent and your publicity team and think, okay, so what is our next move for the Kardashian brand? Do we want to launch a line of perfumes? Do we want to do a speaking tour? Do we want to go work at the USO and do a bunch of USO shows? Or should we do a sex tape? And that's just one of the options on the menu. That's really kind of, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, maybe it's just me that I'm jealous, because if this was happening when I had been a 14-year-old boy, I mean, if you imagine when you were 14, the idea that whoever was the hottest girl when we were 14, the idea that hey, you can have this box on your on your desk that just brings you naked pictures of this famous girl and you think it's awesome. and why did we miss out on that? That was great. So maybe it's just me being curmudgeonly that we didn't have this around when we were young. I don't know.
Well, it's still there. You're just not 14.
Right, well, that's the whole thing, right? So the thrill is gone, because we're old and jaded. You're like, yeah. You think about when you're 14, the amazing length that you would go to sneak, some torn out page of Playboy. You'd walk 5 towns over to your best friend's cousin's house because he'd found a ripped out page of Playboy in the woods. And now you're like, hey, I'm going to take out my phone and look, there's Kim Kardashian and Jennifer Lawrence naked. Awesome.
Yeah, on your phone. On your phone.
Yeah, exactly.
You can take it with you. You don't have to go anywhere. You can share it right where you are. All right, we're running out of time. I assume this book is available everywhere. I downloaded it on my Nook personally.
I just bought it on my iPad.
Look at that. See,
and Tom took a photo of my iPad so he could go off and get it.
Excellent. Yeah, it is everywhere, and I buy 7 and hand them out for Christmas.
See, come on, GrokTALK, sell books during the show.
Well,
that's the point.
Well, I'll have to put up a link to it.
Yeah, we will. We will definitely link to the book when we post the segment. How about? Do you mind people contacting you directly?
No, not at all. My if you go to my website, just johnsonlast.com, my email's there. It's just jlast@weeklyplanet.com. I'm a big book signing nerd. I have a shelf full of signed books. I just love having books signed. So what I would tell people is if you want me to sign a book and you're not around DC or something, just drop me an email and send me your book. I'll sign it and send it back to you.
I got another question for you, Jonathan, real quick. Do you do speaking engagements with or without book signings? A lot of groups, especially ladies Republican groups in New Hampshire, like to get featured speakers. And
I do a lot of I do a lot of that, I would say, and weirdly enough, it's all about my other gig is demographics, and so I do a lot of talk about politics and demographics too. So if you're up in the New Hampshire area and would like to have me come up, I have 3 small kids, and so I will pay you to have me come up for 48 hours and do a speech.
If you'll just show up and talk for a small or zero fee, there'll be people that'll rip your arm off.
We can get lots of people to come see you. Yeah.
No casinos.
Anything to get out of the house.
All right.
All right. We've reached the end of the segment, Jonathan Les. Thank you so much for taking some time to listen to me stumble. To spend time with GrokTALK.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
All right, thank you. Have a great weekend.
You too.
All right, that was Jonathan Last from the Weekly Standard, the editor of The 7 Deadly Virtues. It is a funny book. I have popped through a couple of the segments and sections in there, and it's really, really good. It's worth your time. So go check it out. Coming up next, it's us. So we're going to talk about some stuff again, and you're going to hang on and listen, right? Yes. Great. I'm glad you said that. This is GrokTALK. We'll be right back.
New Hampshire is famous for scenic drives, but they're tough to enjoy when you're on your way to the doctor. Because Obamacare limits your choices, some will have to drive more than an hour to see a doctor. What's health insurance worth if care isn't there when you need it? Jean Shaheen voted for Obamacare, putting your doctors and hospitals further out of reach. Tell Senator Shaheen Obamacare is not working for New Hampshire.
Jean Shaheen and her allies are making false claims about her record on veterans. The truth? Shaheen refused to meet with veterans pushing for reform. She wasn't on the committee that wrote the reform legislation and refused to co-sponsor important VA reforms in the VA Management Accountability Act until after the VA scandal broke. When our veterans needed her, Jean Shaheen was AWOL. Tell Jean Shaheen to stop distorting the truth and fix the VA.
Hi, this is Rich Gerard, host of Gerard at Large in the Morning, the Manchester area's only locally owned, locally operated, focused, and interested riveting radio show, heard live every Monday through Friday from 6 to 9 on 90.7 FM WLMW New Hampshire Family Radio, and available 24/7 live or archived at GerardAtLarge.com. Be sure to tune in.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Rock Talk.